I know math is not the forte of the Conservative Party of Canada. Let me walk them through it.
Welcome back to Moose and Loose. My name's David, and today we've got House Comment session here where Guilbeault gets caught lying. He thinks he's being a cheeky, sneaky little monkey, but he is lying and he gets caught in it. He tries a gotcha moment with the Conservatives with the gas prices and the road trips. The Conservatives have been saying take the gas off until Labor Day for like basically the next 3 or 4 months, basically for the next 3 months, and Canadians can save, what was it, $672, something like that, for road trips in the summer. And Guilbeault comes with the numbers and tries to be Mr. Sneaky, and not so fast.
After 9 years, this NDP Liberal Prime Minister is not worth the cost, and Canadians are suffering through his inflation and high interest rates. For many families, the best hope for a summer vacation will be a modest road trip. Parents will sketch out a budget based on meals and hotels, and a big expense will be fuel. The GST, excise tax, and carbon tax have helped push fuel prices to near record levels, with many families unable to afford a vacation at all. Conservatives have proposed taking the tax off of gas and diesel for the summer, saving Canadians 35 cents a litre. Will the Prime Minister vote for our motion, or will he force more Canadians to stay home this summer?
Mr. Speaker, this is a prime cut of Conservative baloney. And I know what I'm talking about. My dad was a butcher, Mr. Speaker. The savings that the Conservative Party of Canada claims for Albertans is based on people traveling 37,000 kilometers during their holidays, Mr. Speaker. 37,000 kilometers. You can go from the North Pole to the South Pole and you would have kilometers left to achieve the savings that they claim, Mr. Speaker.
So you notice here, he doesn't bring up his numbers because he's trying to bait in Andrew Scheer to say the number, the $670 that he's been saying in the previous sessions. Let's watch what happens.
That's just not true, Mr. Speaker, and everybody knows that the carbon tax costs more than the rebate. That is why the Prime Minister was humiliated into granting a carve-out for just some people in some parts of the country. And that's all we're asking for today, a carve-out on federal taxes on fuel and diesel for the summer. For the average family in Ontario, that would mean almost $600 in savings. Now, to the Prime Minister and his wealthy friends,
Okay, so almost $600 in savings.
that might not seem like a lot of money, but to struggling Canadians, that could make the difference to be able to say yes to the kids when they ask for some summertime fun. So will the Prime Minister have an ounce of compassion and help more Canadian families afford a vacation?
Mr. Speaker, I know math is not the forte of the Conservative Party of Canada. Let me walk them through it.
There we go.
Their math. The Albertans would have to use 3,293 liters of gasoline over a 3-month period, Mr. Speaker.
So just note there, he said Albertans. That's a very key point because he's picking the absolute cheapest gas in Canada, which is not a fair assessment. The average gas price across Canada is 1.8 or $1.80 a liter, where in Alberta, it's often $1.30 up to $1.50. Right away, he's cherry picking.
At an average of 8.9 liters per 100 kilometers, that equivalent to 37,000 kilometers. You would have to drive for 10 consecutive days, non-stop, Mr. Speaker. If you had 2 weeks vacation, you would have 2 days left, or maybe 3, to enjoy your vacation.
I have no idea what he's talking about. If you look here in the Conservatives, let's make it bigger here. They all pulled out the calculators on their phones and they're doing math because they're super confused. You can see Garnet Genuous here is super confused as well. And look at these bumbling idiots over here laughing and clapping.
Order.
So I've done the real math on here, and Guilbeault, he's wrong. He's very wrong. So Guilbeault basically said you could drive to this North Pole and the South Pole. So what I've broken down here is a real road trip I used to take every single summer with my family. This is a real example, and we did it with 6 people in the car, and then also have an example here for towing, because a lot of people tow a camper or a boat for a road trip. Gas price on the highway, we have the gas price in the city, and then we have gas price with towing. It's important. Using his numbers, 8.9 liters per 100 kilometers for highway driving at 1.8 or $1.80 per liter, it basically costs you $16 to go 100 kilometers. And then the same sort of math here in the city at 12 liters per 100 kilometers is $21. And the towing price is 28 liters. This is from looking up a whole bunch of stuff. On average, people say 28. Some people say 30, 35 liters per 100 kilometers to tow a boat or a camper, depending on what you're towing, how much weight. So that works out to be just over $50 per 100 kilometers to tow something. So I grew up in Stettler, Alberta, which is right here. So we would drive from Stettler to Kelowna, where we had a little condo somewhere around here. As you can see, that's 832 kilometers one way. Thus, you would have that going two ways. There's 6 of us too, so we're going to price that in because you have to include the cost of weight, but I'll also separate if you're doing a solo road trip and towing. So if we look in the middle here, basically 836 kilometers one way, that's 1672 total, plus an extra 600 kilometers of additional driving. What we would do once we'd get here is we'd enjoy the lake or whatever, but then we'd drive up to, wherever, 100 kilometers here, 100 kilometers there of extra highway driving. On top of that, then you're driving around town, you're going over there, going in the go-karts and whatever. So you'd rack up another 100 kilometers total, staying within the city. So I have that split out based on the liters here. So the total highway driving is 2,272 kilometers, and then we have the additional 100 in the city. If you're one person doing this, it would cost you $385.57. Now we need to add in the weight of the extra people, and I looked at a bunch of different metrics, and people say it's roughly about 5% extra person that's in there. We had an extra 5 people, so a total of 6, which brings it up to $481.96 if you have 6 people crammed in a truck like we did. But we do have the towing factor here, so let's look at that. We've got the gas towing price, $50 per 100 kilometers for towing. So this needs to be broken up a little bit differently. So the highway driving, you would detach your boat or your camper. So you're only driving to wherever you're staying in Kelowna and then detaching. And then you have an extra 600 for driving around shorter road trips from that area, and then the extra 100 within the city. And those have all their different calculations, so you can see with no boat, etc. And often there would be someone just towing a boat by themselves because a lot of people want to go fishing or whatever. All in doing that math, you got 842 just to drive over there. You've got 96 for driving the little road trips without towing, and then $21 for the city driving. All in, it's $1,059.69. Now, with all this said, if they took the taxes off, it would be 35 cents a liter. 35 cents a liter of $1.80 is 19.6 something, whatever, about 20%. So if we take this final number here and multiply it by 20%, it's basically almost $100. That's how much you would save by taking off the tax. And that's what Guibo is leaning on. He's thinking, oh yeah, just somebody going out and driving somewhere and driving back, road trip. Now, if we look at the towing, same thing, 20% of that is $211. Now, you might be thinking, okay, now both the Conservatives and the Liberals are not even close with these numbers. Guibo said you have to drive 37,000 kilometers, which is ridiculous. That's simply not true. Using my own math, I basically calculate if you drive from Vancouver to St. John's and back, it's about 11,700 kilometers. And if you run that through those metrics, 20%, it works out to be $460 with just under $500, which is what the Conservatives said. But realistically, no one is driving across Canada and back for a road trip. But this is not what the Conservatives are thinking about with a road trip. With a road trip, a lot of people rent those Canada Dreams and they drive across Canada one way, and then they drop it off at another location, or they tow a boat somewhere. Like I mentioned, in my case, we towed it one province over. Some people might tow it further. So I used the Gas Buddy here just as another metric. You can put in all the miles per gallon, all this kind of stuff. And what I basically found is if you're towing your boat or you're driving your camper, your motorhome or whatever to Manitoba and back, and say you're doing this over a couple months, this is very accurate. This works out to be, so 2534 multiplied by 20% is $506. So that's right where the Conservatives are at. So I think the Conservatives were maybe using the far end if people were using a camper and driving, which people do. This is realistic, big gas guzzling campers. Maybe they're pushing the numbers a little bit, but it is still within the ballpark range. Guibo is completely out to lunch though with 37,000 kilometers, unless you're driving like a Prius. And if you're in Ontario driving over to Saskatchewan or Manitoba or the other direction, you're going to be clocking the same kilometers because Canada is a big country. This guy cherry picks the gas prices from Alberta. More lies. And these guys are all cackling like a bunch of jackal idiots. So
I don't think math is the forte of someone who brags that he doesn't think about monetary policy and thinks that budgets balance themselves, Mr. Speaker.
Exactly.
Maybe the reason why the Prime Minister is being so cruel about this issue is because he's long forgotten the thrill of the family road trip. You see, he has wealthy lobbyists who invite him to their private islands where he doesn't have to pay for the villas and he gets to stick taxpayers with the bill. But Canadian workers have to pay for all the inflation, all the interest rates, and all the tax hikes themselves. So will he have an ounce of compassion, take fuel taxes off for the summer so Canadians can have a road trip this year?
Mr. Speaker, I don't think Canadians' idea of summertime fun is being locked in a car for 10 straight days. I think their idea of summertime fun also isn't having their dental care taken away or taking
You guys need to do the real math, man. This is embarrassing.
away their diabetes medication, or that their summertime fun is losing childcare, Mr. Speaker. Their definition of summertime fun, I think maybe they should have a conversation with kids about what they want to do with their summer. I think they care more about getting dental care and having good teeth than being locked in a car for 10 straight days.
Yeah, name how many, 87-year-olds are going on long road trips. What a dumb comment. There's no dental care for the rest of us. What is this garbage? Let me know down below if you or anyone who is 87 years or older goes on long road trips.
After 9 years, this Liberal NDP Prime Minister is not worth the hunger or homelessness as 1 in 4 Canadians skip meals. Edith is a single mom in my community that can't afford to feed her kids because this Prime Minister doubled groceries and gas. And his bright idea, he jacked up the carbon tax 23%. Common sense Conservatives are calling on him to axe all federal fuel taxes this summer to save average families $670. Will he vote with us, or does he want more families like Edith's to go hungry and broke?
Mr. Speaker, maybe I need to go through the math again to make sure that it is understood.
Please don't.
The savings that the Conservative Party is claiming based on that assertion is based on the use of gasoline over the summertime of 3,293 liters of gasoline. Do the math. It's not complicated. At an average consumption of 8.9 liters per 100 kilometers, a family in Alberta would have to drive 37 kilometers to be able to benefit for those claimed savings, Mr. Speaker. This has nothing to do with reality. It would be nice for the Conservative Party of Canada to come down to earth and leave La La Land for a little while.
Well, Liberal math for that anti-Alberta minister says that jacking up the carbon tax 20% is somehow going to fix forest fires and reduce the...
I'm going to just ask the honourable member to start from the top again and just to rephrase it slightly on that front. The honourable member from Calgary Forest Lawn from the top.
Liberal math says jacking up the carbon tax 23% is going to somehow magically fix forest fires and reduce the cost of groceries like that Edith can't afford. And they think we're gullible and incompetent like the NDP, that we blindly support policies that made 2 million Canadians go into a food bank in a single month and that made 1 in 4 Canadians skip meals. Why don't they do everyone a favor? Give Canadians a break and put them out and finally end their misery. Call a carbon tax election so common sense Conservatives can scrap the carbon tax scam and Canadians can kick this costly carbon tax coalition to the curb.
That's funny. He gets a little spicy with his stuff sometimes. Straight up calling the NDP incompetent. I like it.
There they go again, Mr. Speaker. They want to ruin the rebate for Canadians. A rebate that disproportionately impacts the middle class and lower income Canadians working hard to join the middle class. I also noticed, Mr. Speaker, that throughout the past few weeks, they've been quoting from reports from Food Banks Canada, from Salvation Army, and those reports are important. We thank those organizations for those reports. What they point out are challenges faced by Canadians. In those recommendations,
You know what's a challenge facing Canadians? When people get a carbon tax rebate for $17. I keep hearing all these stories, people getting the most ridiculous, insulting low amounts of rebates. And then you got people like me or people in Quebec. There's no rebate. I drive to Calgary and back. I get no rebate on all of that gas I have to use. There's zero rebate. So Captain Crumb Snatcher here needs to just button it up and sit back down.
After 9 years, this NDP Liberal government is not worth the hunger and homelessness that it's causing so many Canadians across this country. Many Canadians just simply look forward to a small summer vacation, a road trip perhaps. It's normally a time where they can go and camp in the mountains or go to a national park or visit loved ones. But this year, many Canadians can't afford this simple delight because this government has made life too expensive. On Monday, this House will have the opportunity to vote on a common sense motion to save Canadians 35 cents per litre on gas. Will the Prime Minister vote with us, the common sense Conservatives, so that Canadians can afford a simple vacation, or will he force them to stay home?
Mr. Speaker, good news, kids. You can take a summer fun time vacation where you're locked in a car car for 10 consecutive days, nonstop with no bathroom breaks, and the Conservatives have a plan for you to have that summertime fun. And the cost? Give up the future of the planet, right? Don't worry, kids, about climate change. Don't worry about taking action on the planet. Enjoy your 10 hours in the car and let the planet burn.
Wow, this is coming from Captain Maid here, Minister of Death. You know, there's a video that came out recently about that, and I've been debating whether I can show it or not, because it is bad. But basically talks about how that program actually works. In saying as much as I can here so you get what I'm talking about, basically, imagine somebody poked you in the arm, and then you can't function anymore. There's was it ALS? I think there's a disease like that where you can't function, but your brain's still there. And then you slowly start to perish, and you could be screaming in your own head, but nothing works. Your mouth doesn't work, your arms don't work, you can't do anything and then this lasts for 24 hours before you actually perish. You basically have to endure 24 hours of ungodly suffering like that before that medication kicks in. And that medication was designed to never be used on humans, yet it's being used on humans. Look at these fools cheering him on like he's some sort of hero. If you look at the Maid numbers, it's appalling. So there's like 22,000 people are gone because of Captain Red Bowtie here. Get a life jacket on, your ship is sinking. I'm pretty sure a conservative said that.
Well, this out-of-touch Prime Minister might be able to take a $230,000 taxpayer-funded vacation to some fancy island, but that's not an option for most Canadians. In fact, most Canadians just simply want to be able to get in a car and drive a few kilometers to enjoy a national park or the mountains for the day. But that's even out of reach for so many of them because of this Liberal government's out-of-touch policies that are driving up the cost of everything. On Monday, this House will have the opportunity to vote on a very common-sense motion that would take the federal tax off of fuel. It would make life affordable for Canadians and allow them to enjoy their summer. Will the Prime Minister vote with us so that Canadians can afford a simple road trip, or will he force them to stay at home while he enjoys his luxury vacation?
Mr. Speaker, today we're having a lot of fun with figures because the Conservative AI machine suddenly kind of broke down and didn't quite supply them with the right math, and they do rely heavily on that for mathematics. I do note that that member fights against a regime that sends 8 out of 10 Albertans more money than they pay in. But she was a little sheepish, a little quiet when her own Premier, Danielle Smith, hiked gas taxes 13 cents to fuel, increased government spending in Alberta. She didn't talk about that. I wonder why.
Because it's an automatic program based on the price of oil? That argument doesn't fly, man.
After 9 years of this NDP Liberal government, Canadians know this Liberal Prime Minister, he's not worth the homelessness, he's not worth the hunger, and he's not worth the tent cities that are propping up everywhere. The only road trip these Liberal know are their ministers driving around in their limousines with their chauffeurs. Will they support the motion to axe the tax, yes or no?
Conservative motion, Mr. Speaker, is written on the same napkin as their housing plan. The reality is that whenever it comes to serious issues of the day, all they have are slogans, Mr. Speaker, hollow slogans. What happened in the House of Commons?
These guys are just getting more and more arrogant and insulting by the day. It's wow. This is unbelievable.
It's unbelievable. This would save 35 cents a liter in gasoline. Now, it doesn't mean much to ministers who get driven around by chauffeurs in their limos who probably haven't pumped gas and know the cost of gas in about 10 years. But for the average Canadian family, it will mean everything. And they could actually do something about it. I know they don't take road trips, but actual Canadian families do. And it will make a difference. And they've got a choice. They can vote to actually take those taxes off, save Canadians 35 cents a litre so they can take a road trip, or they continue to punish Canadians with this damn carbon tax.
I ask members to be very careful about the use of language in the House.
Throw them out?
Minister.
Loose-lipped, vile-tongued liberals just spewing garbage as usual. I don't know if this is a strategy switch up. They're like, yeah, let's get really snappy and arrogant and vile and just snap back and be really aggressive. Are they just breaking? Are they getting harassed by Canadians? Are they getting heckled on the streets? Are they just filled with hate and rage because of how much suffering they've caused? They're getting that back, and now it's coming out in the House of Commons. I don't know what's going on. When reading body language, it's best to get them out of this kind of situation because they kind of transform it a bit into a different person. Even if they're out speaking somewhere to a camera, say somebody comes up to them and talks to them, or if they're even in a podcast or something, it's better. But I have a feeling a lot of these people transform into a different kind of person when they're in the House. Finally, we've got a really nutty suggestion coming from Elizabeth May. What else would you expect?
Mr. Speaker, I had the great honor of participating yesterday in a symposium and attended by so many brilliant young people arguing that the voting age should be 16 years old. Mr. Speaker, the Vote 16 movement includes a bunch of people over 70, like myself. Well, I'm not over 70, I'm almost 70. My point is, Mr. Speaker, all of us, regardless of party, should get behind this.
So she wants this country to be one where people can vote, but they can't drink. Well, how does that make sense? Someone who's 16 years old doesn't have enough life experience to vote. This doesn't need to change. This is going to cost a lot of money, and it doesn't make sense. This whole situation with Guilbeault is very confusing. It's very puzzling. Saying 37,000 kilometers is the distance Canadians would have to travel.
37,000 kilometers during their holidays, Mr. Speaker.
I've been trying to do the math and figure out what he is talking about. So we look here. He said 8.9 liters per 100 kilometers is the metric he's using. So 8.9 liters, if you multiply that by 35 cents a liter, because that's what would be the savings, the Conservatives are saying, when taking the gas off, it's $3, and we'll round it up to 12 cents. $3.12 per 100 kilometers that Canadians would save. Now, if you take 37,000 kilometers and divide that by the 100 metric, you'd end up with 370. Multiply that by $3.12. That makes sense to me. Maybe I got this wrong, but that's $1,154 under Guilbeault's own metrics that he just said. It doesn't, there's no way this makes sense. Like, even under his own metrics, it would be like 15,000 kilometers would be 150. Multiply that by $3.12. There, so that's what the Conservatives were saying, under $500. So it would be 15,000. It's less than half of what Guilbeault is saying. If you're doing a road trip with something like that, it'd be like a Prius or something very fuel efficient, not a gas guzzling RV or towing a boat or having a camper or anything like that. I cannot figure out what that nutjob Stephen Guilbeault is talking about. All right, so jumping over to my group now, let's look at some memes. Do you think clouds ever look down at us from the sky and say, hey, that one looks like an idiot? I put a potato in the microwave and pushed the pizza button. The little bell rang, but it was still a potato. Trudeau viewed by himself by other world leaders. I stand to urinate. This is in the next budget for sure. Jagmeet Singh can't get enough of that liberal teat. Are you mom enough? What is this? Poster boy for weak men create hard times. Yeah, no kidding. With the ducks. Why? Why does he do the socks? Resign never. Rather shove a wet noodle up a bobcat's butt in a telephone booth than listen to another Trudeau speech. Well, you're lucky he wasn't in this video. Rare picture of where Canada meets USA after 4 years of the carbon tax. Fancy socks and period bracelets. We are not a serious country. We are removing the word idiot from the language because I'm getting really tired of being called it. Coolest septic truck ever. Stool buzz. That's where we're going to end today's episode. Let me know in the comments down below what you guys thought about this absolute mayhem that's going on in the House of Commons. You've got Mark Holland just, you know, he couldn't go this long without going berserk. He had to bring it back. You got all the stooges and fools out there, the bootlickers, all of them. There's too many of them. But the biggest one, Guilbeault, just stirring the pot there, and he's got all his buddies just rallying him on. It's like, yeah, I did some bad math. It's just so embarrassing, man. Can you not run that past someone first? Thanks for watching the end of the video. Be sure to subscribe and hit the thumbs up. Ring that notification bell. Get notified of all my videos. We'll keep fighting for freedom. I'll keep bringing you guys the truth. See you in the next one.